developing a vision, holding on to it, finding people who have this, who share that vision is usually important. Having a community and then having those people to work with and have fun with as well. And a really hot guy as well when I was 14 years old.
Really, really excited to welcome today Valerie Del Re, the Executive Director of Greenpeace Belgium, and an all-time awesome woman that I've had the incredible fortune of being in conversation with for a few months now on various things. Valerie, you've been an activist since you were young, right? And at 14, you already went into politics. Which is a really big thing, a big devotion for somebody so young. You clearly have a big vision for the world. You joined the Young Socialists at that time, and then you stayed in politics until you were 38. I mean, a 24-year history from, is that right? Yeah, I'm bad at maths, but I think that's about right. Assistant to an MP, advisor to ministers, cabinet, member of the Flemish Social Democrat Party, the political bureau, and an alderman in Hasselt for 12 years. So a long and resilient, maybe beyond resilient, but at least resilient political history. And we'll find out a bit more about how that relates to your resilience and what was important about that and what might be beyond resilient for you. Is there anything else that you would like to say about who you are before we dive into all of our questions?
I think that the political aspect was also Greenpeace. It's also tied to how I define resilience, is that I always had a very clear image or passion on about what I wanted to do. And that's how I got into politics very young. I was also a little bit, when I was 14, it was not that much of a strategic choice. I also rolled into it because it was an interest of mine, which I discovered in school through an exceptionally good history teacher. And then I joined this young socialist party, and I also get enthusiastic because I met uh, cool people to hang out with, and it was fun. But yeah, I think it also really tapped into a passion for positive change that I always remember having.
A passion for positive change. I love that. And just the role models in your life as well that were able to open up the way forward for that passion for positive change.
Yeah, yeah. I always tell the story about this history teacher because it really was what sparked my interest in politics, and it was, by all accounts, a really boring teacher, like one that not everybody liked, like a real nerdy person. But he gave us an assignment, and it was at the moment that there were local elections in Belgium, to follow the elections and make an analysis of the different parties and really go into the ideologies of the different parties. And then I researched it and I decided I'm a socialist. When I read this and I read what's behind this, this is who I am. And that's how I got into there. So it was really unexpected, but it's probably been because I've been in politics after, and I've always imagined that I would find like mentors or role models there, but there are people that I've looked up to, but never this one person who inspired me so much as this history teacher did.
To all the
What
teachers
a
out
great
there,
assignment.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the role of teachers is so undervalued, and here you are all these years later, and we really need to thank them and to tell them to keep going. Valerie, we wanted to start with a question for you because we're going to tie all this back into the beyond resilience conversation. Would you have a song that represents the way you relate to resilience, what it means to you?
Well, I couldn't really think of a song, but I had this image that I used a few times, and it's of a phoenix. It's a mythological bird that dies sometimes spectacularly and sometimes quietly, but then always rises up again. So that image always inspired me because it symbolizes that you go through failure and you reinvent yourself. And I've always been someone who likes to try new and different things and likes to reinvent herself after a few years. So yeah, this image has always really stood by me, especially when talking about resilience, because you always come out better.
I love that image. And it when you first said it, I thought to myself, well, this is really interesting because on the one hand, we love the phoenix for being able to be reborn and thrive again. But on the other hand, they have to go through death, right? Something awful.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that's why it
yeah.
spoke to me, because I feel like when I was thinking about my stories of resilience, I feel that I died is overly dramatic, but I've gone through some difficult periods, but always in hindsight, at the moment it's difficult to see, but in hindsight always came out better. So that's why this image really spoke to me.
Well, we're going to ask you exactly that question, Valerie, about your story of resilience. When did you first know you were resilient? And tell us the story that defines that and that relates back to that amazing metaphor that you have for it.
Yeah, the moment I left politics, because as I explained, it was a long time thing. I got into it very young, and it was always, yeah, I think that more than most people that I knew, I always knew what I wanted to do from a really young age. It was clear to me that I wanted to be in politics, and I wanted to change the world, and I wanted to be, president of the world. But at a certain moment, I realized that this was probably coming to an end, and that was a really hard moment. And there were different reasons. I had a conflict with somebody in my party, but it was also increasingly clear to me that I wasn't going to be able to reach what I wanted to reach in that career, and I was getting increasingly frustrated. So at some point, I decided that it was time to move on. So it was a really difficult moment because all of my hopes and dreams and a big part of my identity were like intertwined with that career as well. So, and it took place over several years. The realization and then actually letting go was really hard and sad. But in the end, I found something new, and I didn't. What I'm proud of in the resilience story is that I didn't wait so long until I was completely cynical and negative, that I took power and found something new to my passion and enthusiasm, which is then Greenpeace, the career I'm in now. So yeah, that's and yeah, seeing how painful it was at the moment, but also how I got through it and how I found something equally fun and rewarding to do was for me a real example of resilience.
Mm. What would you say is the key quality of that resilience that you've developed through that experience in particular, but maybe also through others? Or the key quality of resilience that you were showing?
Yeah, I think it's a realization that nothing is ever as bad as it seems when you're in
Mm-hmm.
it. Really, to be able to put into perspective whatever is happening. So I think what's important for me is the empowerment of it, to not let things happen to you, but take control of it
Mm.
and do something about it. Find a new direction, something new to aim it on, and the knowledge that came with age and going through several disappointments and whatever setbacks in life, and knowing that worked out quite well. So
Be the phoenix for you or the river for me, it's regenerative. Like that dying, there's something that comes out of the flames. And if I think of Australian bushfires from where I've come, they're actually, when they're not horribly destructive, they regenerate new growth.
mhm.
But with the disappointment, it sounds like you had a process for being in acceptance before you got to cynicism, before you got to resignation, which to me are part of the resilience model. You looked again about what your vision was, where you were going, what you really wanted, and recognized that the path you were taking wasn't going to take you. My sense is that there's an acceptation, which is to us a beyond resilient, part of the beyond resilient world, knowing how to accept, which is still painful, be able to grieve and then redirect your path. So it feels very much like a forward movement rather than a bounce back.
Yeah, that's also really how I feel it, and I think it's intertwined with my personality. I'm a very forward-looking person. I'm not the kind of person that really looks back a lot and dwells on whatever has happened and the mistakes and so on, although it's changing a little bit with age. I enjoy looking forward to the next thing. I'm also an inherent optimist. I can't help but seeing most of the time. I also have my less happy periods, but most of the time I can't help to see the positive and the opportunity that can come out of things. So that's also how I see like the probably the attitude or the personality traits that have made me resilient over the past years.
I'm seeing this theme too. It's really interesting because most of the time when we talk about resilience, being aware of your situation, understanding where it's leading, knowing that that's not maybe where you want to go, and again redirecting, as Angela said, it's really interesting. It's a much more, I would say, compassionate view as well, and a creative view about how you deal with situations.
Yeah, maybe also about the analogy energy in nature. I really consciously sometimes go into nature and almost tree hug, really touch things, be there, sit there. For me, that's a really energizing experience as well, together with also taking time to connect with friends and that kind of thing. So, yeah, and I also see society as a whole, or any organization, or us living in it. People are a part of nature. So I also consider myself and everything that is in the world as being a part of a huge ecosystem which works in mostly the same ways, which is probably why I don't compare it to machines, but more to natural processes.
Valerie, what do you think? Like, if we look at the resilience model in the world, which is again like forging forward, generally, people don't talk the way you do about resilience. Most people are talking about when they overcame something. And there's always setbacks in life, or there are always challenges, obstacles, difficulties. You know, my house burnt down as well, or we've left people have died, we've had illnesses. That's part of human life. But we've really developed that resilient theory about, well, people being resilient based on the capacity of a polymer to bounce back and regain the same shape. And then we talk about it like bouncing back like a rubber band or being machine again. What do you think the impact of that definition has had on the world and on nature, on the environment, and on women's leadership?
I was thinking a little bit about it. I think part of that, just the bouncing back and not looking at it as something that's an evolution, is probably reinforcing a system that we have. If you're always resilient and always just coping and always just moving on, I think it perpetuates a system that we're in, which we all agree upon. I mean, most of us, I think, that it's broken and that we do not want to continue in the future. I think it's crystal clear that it's not doing any good for the planet, for the happiness and well-being of the people and all living creatures that live on that planet. So I think by just being resilient without trying to change, question, evolve, is perpetuating a system that we are very passionate about changing.
Changing through the phoenix.
To me, it's one of these things that people don't really talk about. But of course, a rubber band bounces back or whatever it is. But when you're talking about that thing, things do break, right? There, because you do it too often, things break. It's you haven't changed the system that's causing the problem in the first place, right? And even in manufacturing, the thing is, if things break, you're supposed to change the system to make sure it doesn't break. And so in a way, we're almost sitting back, even in the mechanical world. We're not in the latest thinking on how you deal with these things, right? It's quite amazing.
Even that's evolved. Yeah. You don't try and change the thing, you try and change the system so the thing doesn't break.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things I really loved about working for Greenpeace. It's an organization that searches for root causes and not just tries to look at the symptoms. And I think this is also part of it. If something goes wrong, you look at what's behind it and what's causing the problem, and not just trying to resolve the problem. And I think it's true for everything. If it's a machine that's broken, it's something causing it. If it's climate change, there's something behind it, which is causing it, and it's a broken system. So yeah, so it's fixing the system and not just the symptoms.
Or even changing the system completely sometimes, I think, because the system that we're in is the system. And what we're looking at is, so we go from something that's about fixing, the whole system that we're in, and including the resilience conversation, like Carolyn and you were saying before, is very much about coping, overcoming. It's short term. It's a short term cycles. There's no long term view. And like you were saying, we're not going to root causes. We even see it in medicine. We treat symptoms before we go and look at what's really behind it. And what about a holistic view of the human being?
Mm.
And I don't just mean in terms of only natural therapies. And I went not long ago to have my hip looked at. I went to see a rheumatologist, and of course I got the cortisone injections or something.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've never been in so much. I had more pain, but it turned out to be menopausal problem. But if all of these doctors consulted with each other, we might actually have a holistic view of something. And it feels like this is this whole change in system, looking at root causes, looking at systemically how everything fits together. I mean, I get that that can feel really big, but that seems like the beyond resilient conversation as well, like having the vision, moving forward, looking at root causes, collectively considering things rather than trying to spot fix.
I love the example that you gave, Angela, and I have an example from my area of interest, and I was wondering, Valerie, whether you have kind of an example from Greenpeace or that you could use too, just to illustrate this, because I think it's so important. So my interest is cash transfers for the very poor, and one of the research papers that came out said that if you give cash transfers to the very poor, you cut tuberculosis by more than 60 or 70% in certain populations. And that's without a tuberculosis vaccine, right? That's just solving the problem of how tuberculosis is transmitted through poor health, through overcrowding, through and that's the root cause of this problem. And I'm assuming you have many examples as well, Valerie.
Yeah, sure. I think if you look at climate emergency and biodiversity crisis, it's also really connected to an underlying economical system and a capitalist system, which is just broken and which is rewarding extraction and greed instead of rewarding regeneration and a respectful handling of natural resources and people and all. So yeah, there is a big analogy in there, and it's with everything. I think if you look at inequality is probably the driver. I was inspired by your example. Inequality is probably the driver of many problems we are facing in society today. But unfortunately, there's still a big debate while there's so much evidence to support that. So yeah, there's everything is connected, which is super overwhelming. It's one of the challenges that I think within Greenpeace as an organization, but all organizations who want to do something to make the world a better place are struggling with, because it's also connected. It becomes too big of a problem for people to grasp and to understand. But at the same time, if we do not treat it in a holistic way, we're not going to be successful in changing it. So we'll have to find a way to also tackle complex problems and chaos, basically.
But what do you think is the role of vision in that, Valerie, as well? Like having a vision of what's after. How important is that?
At the moment, I've heard it referred to as a crisis of imagination, but even as very progressive people who have it intrinsically in them to change the world and change the system have difficulty in a different system. I have this work of art on my wall in my living room, which says it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism, which I really love, because it's difficult for everybody to rethink the world. We've grown up in it. It's a frame, it's a paradigm that we have difficulty even thinking outside of. And so yeah, I think vision is hugely important, and it's painfully lacking at the moment. So we could do with a bit more positive vision, and also the energy and the belief, because it's maybe some people can imagine it, but they don't really believe it's possible anymore. And that's also what is making people very disempowered to tackle any of the problems that faces. They lost the faith, and they're basically in this state of, I don't know, mental overload, because the problem is too big, and feeling disempowered because the world has taught us that we're all individuals, and as an individual you can't really do anything about it, but it's as a collective that we can change it. And people have lost their belief in our collective power because we've been brainwashed over the last 50 years that this is possible.
Mm.
I want to come back to that because that's so important what you said. And I think that two things. One, it links back to your very first introduction, which is the purpose that drove you to go into politics. And you say you've had this clear passion for such a long time, and that with that passion and belief lacking in people because they can't imagine something else, makes it difficult for people to unite around something and build community and be something more than just the individual, right? And that leads us to being less resilient. Both of those things together, the fact that we don't have a clear vision and we don't have connection.
I think it keeps us in the resilient context rather than in the beyond resilient context as well. So it's really great to be resilient as well, right? I mean, it's just that for me, resilience, we need to think beyond it while still being resilient. Like there are moments where you do need to look, got to pick myself up from that one. But we still can create forward, but without the hope that you were talking about, the active hope, the optimism and the vision, where all we're doing is stuck in a problem solving cycle and just picking ourselves up again and wearing ourselves out. And so adding to your point, Carolyn.
I've also been really privileged because I come from a good middle class family. I have had the opportunity to go and study in different very cool institutions abroad. So, and I had the opportunity to be in politics at a very young age, which gave me some power and gave me the experience of not only having to be passive and being able to change some things. So I think that has also given me that kind of belief that it's possible. And I acknowledge that most people don't have that. There's a lot of people who do not have, first of all, the privileged background to get into that position, or yeah, being in a position where you see that you are, or feel empowered. And even I sometimes feel totally disempowered in the world that it is today. It's not hard to get depressed if you look around at the news nowadays. So I've been lucky in having that experience, and that I can draw from that I also use that and draw from that to also shape future experience.
It sounds like you're aware. You've been able to see that you had it as well. You had the privilege, you had the support. Like support's clearly non-negligible, and resources and love. And that, but what I'm hearing is that you're aware that you have it as well. Were you aware when you were 14?
No. It took me a lot longer. I think it took me until, well, I was aware that I came from a good middle class family, that I'm an only child, my parents were well off, gave me all the love that you need as a child, and then a good step to education. But I only dove deeper into my own privilege and the lack of people's privilege when within Greenpeace we started this whole diversity and inclusion debate and decolonization debate, which really learned me a lot about and gave me an extra dimension, because coming from this socialist background, I had the sense that, as I said earlier, like most problems in the world are rooted in inequality. But that was very like for me. And being in this whole intercultural, decolonized diversity conversation enriched that vision that it's more than just economical inequality, but there's so many other sources of inequality. So yeah, I'm really grateful for having had that process in this organization, which is cool enough to dive in to these kinds of conversations. And that really taught me a lot more about my own privilege and all of our privilege in the Western world, and so on and so on.
I've got that'll take us on another tangent. So I don't know if you want to add on that first tangent.
So keep your question, because it's really, really important. I just wanted to I was just curious to stay with the vision, go back to the vision. So you might even be going there, Carolyn. Then, as we're aware of all of this inequality and, the need, it's not only the need for diversity, it's like the world is diverse by its very nature. It's a really important topic, but diversity is right there. I mean, plants are diverse, and I mean, biodiversity is dropping, unfortunately, and there's all this monoculture, but it's like the rich beauty of the earth is only due to diversity and collaboration. I wanted to come back to the importance of vision then. How important was vision and purpose in being able to lead forward?
Still, it's for me, it's really the source and what my source of energy, if I have to describe it like that, because having a strong vision, and sometimes it's not super detailed, it could just be a vision on how the world ought to be, what the values are, what the big elements are. Also in my organization I had a vision, but it was not a complete action plan. It was more like a point on the horizon where you want to move towards. That for me is really a driving force, and it's really what keeps me going, even when things are not going very well, or you have a setback, or you get into the problem solving of every day, and you're so overwhelmed that you forget long-term vision sometimes. But having the long-term vision or dream even is really what keeps me going. Yeah.
Going beyond resilience for your organization, what do you think the elements are that you're using to try and build that?
Well, it's not been an easy path over the last years. For Greenpeace, we had to also really adapt our organization to the same that people need on an individual level. That we build this organization where people can feel safe enough, or how do you self-secure enough, confident enough, maybe that's the word, to be able to cope with fast change, because there's going to be 101 things coming our way, huge challenges in society, also on an organizational level. The world is changing as a big older organization. Things change fast, and it's not always so easy to catch up. So what my dream would be for any organization that wants to do good in the world is that we can find a way to also let people tap into their shared passion, because that's really apparent in Greenpeace, but I'm sure also in different civil society organizations. People are there because it aligns with their values and their beliefs. So to teach people to tap into that strength and have enough confidence to be resilient and to face all the shitty things that come your way as well. And that's a difficult, because people tend to panic and feel insecure and unsafe, especially when things are changing and in chaos. So building that organizational force also on the same kind of things that I have built my individual force, I think that's a challenge, and also a dream for the organization, definitely.
It's really important for all organizations, for the world, if we could all tap into our collective passions and live from there. And I think something that you said also is really important, that change is happening so fast, or at least we're aware of it. I used to have conversations with people years ago. It's like they knew what was going to happen. And I'm like, you don't know what's going to happen when you walk out your door. Like most of the times we think we do, but we don't. We don't know if we're going to, I mean, this is awful. I don't know if we're going to twist our ankle when I go out the door. I'm just assuming I'm not going to. I don't know what conversation I'm going to have next week and what exact words, even though I've got conversations booked in. So we have an idea that we know, and that's given a certain sense of security. But what's really true is we can see now just how much uncertainty there is in what we don't know. We've got so much more access to immediate information, and that information is being manipulated to prey on our fears, to prey on our insecurities, to prey on our shadow sides. So whether or not the world was uncertain before, we definitely have the sense of it now. And so I really, that point that you're making about shared passion is what we can have to move forward, because just if we look at that resilience conversation of bouncing back, I don't think we're going to be capable. We're not going to be able to get up as fast as we get knocked down anymore if we stay in that old model of like bounce back like a rubber band and stretch ourselves too thin. And we're starting to see that, I think, with burnout and mental health crises at work and high expectations, and not enough of the passion, not enough of the purpose, not enough of the vision, not enough of giving people something to aspire to and weaving their aspirations in with it, making it like collective. So yeah, it's like such a powerful statement that you made, something for our listeners to really think about. What do you think, Carolyn? Or Valerie, I see.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about. I'm just going back to the power thing. It's like that. It's interesting to have vision and passion and everything, but if you're feeling disempowered, where does it all go? And does that create the real cynicism and disenchantment, it kind of even faster than before? So wondering how beyond resilience incorporates power is an interesting one to try and tackle.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge that we're facing at this moment in time. And it's also, if you look at Trump and Musk strategy in the US today, it's also about tiring people out, like super fast firing of so many different horrible legislative efforts to take away women's right to vote, to take away money from the poor, from the sick. But I think it's designed to overwhelm people, and that's generally a state that we are in the world because things are happening really fast and we get overwhelmed. So I think one of the big challenges is to really find that power and focus on the essence and rediscover the power of the collective. I think that's a huge challenge that we have, and it's not so easy because, as I've said, we have been kind of brainwashed in this increasing state of individualism over in the last, since the birth of the whole neoliberal school. That's been the agenda for the world. So, and we've all gone with it. I've seen maybe 15, 20 years ago, when I was full on in the Socialist Party, one of our big leaders at the time came and spoke to us about Fukuyama and the end of history. And I didn't clock it then, but the fact that social democrats were speaking about one of the biggest neoliberal writers of our age is very significant. It means that even in the whole left-wing political spectrum, everybody embraced this aim of this is the only this neoliberal capitalism is the only possibility we have and the only thing that works. So yeah, we have a long way to catch up, to unthink and to rewire our brain into that. I think that's the work that is ahead of us if we really want to change anything in the world.
And what's one thing, Valerie, I'm just subjugated by what you've just said, and I see Carolyn's really thoughtful as well. Yeah, just how insidious this individualistic thinking is. And again, I want to make the parallel with nature. Like, nature is not. It's an intensely collaborative and collective. And the vision that we've had of nature being some hierarchical food chain has really been seen through the prism of the individual and the patriarchy. It's not actually real. It's an interpretation seen through a prism. And when we really look, we see nature as ecosystems, as life. But I am curious, because this is so important to you, what's one thing that you do to bring back the collectivism that our listeners might be able to think about adopting themselves?
Yeah, a big thing was connected with who I work for and this organization, which is Greenpeace, which has it in its mission. People power is part of the mission of this organization, and bringing activists together and showing that through collective action, we can actually bother some of the most powerful corporations in the world and some of the most powerful politicians in the world. So that has always been really inspiring. On a more, not professional level, I try to, bring people together and also talk about this, and sometimes be a small activist in my local community about things. But I try to give the message to people that if you are complaining about something and you want something to change, you might as well find a group who thinks the same way and start doing something about it, because it's not going to change. I also really hate constant complaining of people. And okay, everybody does it. I also do it sometimes. Sometimes you need to ventilate, but it's not a force of change. It's a force of identifying a problem. So I try to tell people, if they complain, to stop complaining and start taking some action against it, because if they're not going to do it, nobody's going to do it. So that's how I try and inspire people with that around me. But it's not always easy, and I'm definitely not perfect at that.
We need alternative. I mean, Greenpeace is such a great example of alternative ways to do something collectively. Because at the moment, you hear in the States people calling, which is a great thing in itself, but calling their senators or marching or whatever, but nobody knows how to turn those into something more systematic, I guess, systematic change, right? As opposed to point interventions. Yeah. And I think that people could learn, I think, from Greenpeace about what that actually looks like. Yeah. Like a plan rather than just an action.
Yeah, and not just Greenpeace. There's a lot happening in grassroots movements and people uniting themselves in totally different and more and less institutional or organizational ways. And Greenpeace is also an older organization. We exist 52 years globally now. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in society as well, which is different and which is new, which that's also where I draw my hope from in dark times, and also seeing those things happening. And the darker it gets, the more energy there is also for those kinds of movements. So that's where I draw my positive energy and hope from for the future.
Well, the closer we get to the regeneration point, hopefully, the energy comes into doing it.
Yeah, I want to come back also to what you said, Valerie, about complaint not actually being a driver, but keeping us sucked into a lower energy, a lower vibrational energy, and just making it about the problem and almost auto creating powerlessness. Because when we're in complaint, we're essentially powerless. But if we can look at the desire under the complaint and get back to the vision, that's where we can get our energy from again. So I thought that was a really important point you made about recognizing that it doesn't make you bad, but it does sap your power. And if people would actually really look at the effect it has on them to complain and just notice what it does to their agency, that there's a possibility of shifting out of complaint and saying, actually, what do I want? What am I moving towards, and who else is moving towards that, and how together can we mobilize to create? Also, complaint keeps you in a reaction. That means you're only ever defined by the problem you have in front of you rather than the vision that you're moving towards. So how do we collectively help people to vision, to visualize, to envision, to see what's next again, that beyond resilient world, the world where we're in this together and we're actually thriving together as well.
And it's definitely more of an appeal to people in privilege, because that also makes me angry sometimes. Also in my circle of friends, we're all well-off people. Complaint there bugs me more than people who have a reason to complain. And I think it's also the responsibility of the well-off middle-class people to drive that change, because there is a lot of people who are so overwhelmed by just surviving that they do not have the headspace for that. And maybe we shouldn't expect them to do this. It's up to people who do have the headspace and have the luxury to devote some time to activism. And that's also, I can go to a protest and get arrested. It's not going to kill me. For some other people, that is going to be a huge danger for them. So it's also up to the people who can afford it to lead on this collective change and to shield and protect or lead the way for some of the other people.
Yeah, that's so important. Like the word responsibility that you used, our responsibility. And it's true, I think people who are constantly working don't even have time to complain. They're just busy being in it, aren't they? And we often hear, it's like, well, do something about it, move. And I know that sounds very unsympathetic. And sometimes I have an unsympathetic side. I bring out my compassion, but I just like, oh man, come on. We've got possibility here. Yeah.
So we've actually come to nearly the end already. It's been so fast. I can't believe it. But a super interesting conversation on so many levels, and coming back again to that vision and passion and power and again, regeneration is such an important theme for us. And you've brought it out so clearly in what you've been saying. Is there anything else that you think we've missed in our conversation about resilience and beyond resilience?
Yeah, there was one other element that I haven't mentioned yet, which I think is also hugely important, and it's yeah, living and cultivating joy. I had this conversation in my organization, but it's not easy because we had a New Year's party, and I chose that as the topic of my speech because having a New Year's party and a party in this time in history seems weird, and you're celebrating while the world is crumbling around you. But I think it's really important to do that, to have joy and fun in your life, because um, joy is regenerative, it's hopeful, it gives you energy, it's an act of resistance in itself. So seeing the humor and the fun and the joy, I think, is also a big part of where I get my strength. um, yeah, I think that's an important message to give, that even in dark times, it's important to have fun and not feel too guilty or overwhelmed, to just go out and have some fun, because that's what keeps us alive.
Oh, I love it. Spread the joy. I'm curious, as we wrap up. I keep thinking of 14-year-old you, and I wonder. You've, again, Carolyn's really wrapped it up beautifully, and then you've added this extra context of joy. And so I'm wondering if what you would say to the 14-year, if there's anything else you'd say to the 14-year-olds and 14-year-old you about a world beyond resilience and what that might mean.
Whew,
Or anything else you want to say, because you look like you were going to say something.
yeah, difficult. Yeah, I think we've said it a little bit. It's, I hold on to your passion and your vision. Maybe if I had to speak to myself at ages, maybe be more patient on the personal level, because beside the strong vision, I was also very ambitious and very impatient to get places, which was also aligned with status and so on. So being a bit more chilled on that front would have probably helped me a lot, and saved me a lot of pain and disappointment throughout the years. But otherwise, it's yeah, the same as I said. It's developing a vision, holding on to it, finding people who have this, who share that vision, is also usually important. Having a community, and then having those people to work with and have fun with as well. Because a big part of why I stayed with the Young Socialists and I was so passionate is because I discovered a group of great friends and a really hot guy as well when I was 14 years old, which probably was part of the drive to to stay there. So yeah, the community and the like-minded people and the joy is equally as important as the vision and the passion, I think.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. You've given so many wonderful hints to people, and it's been really inspiring talking to you, both on the personal level and how that relates out to the organization and the global. It's been a really fascinating, inspiring, and energizing conversation.
Yeah,
So,
thank you. Really fun to talk to you too.
So if people want to reach out to you, how should they go about that? Would that be acceptable, and how should they go about that?
Well, I'm on Instagram under Valerie Del Re. I have an email address. I'll give my personal email address, which is just my name at
Yeah.
protonmail.com. So
yeah. Well, if they did
Wow.
want to get in contact with you, what specifically, if ever, you would want someone to get in contact with you for? Like, yeah, that's the question.
I don't know, anybody who has an exciting project to change the world, which is based on all the values I just mentioned, I'm always eager to collaborate and yeah, engage the evolution into a new system. So yeah.
Thank you, Valerie, the rise of the phoenix. Thanks for the fantastic conversation. Bye bye.
Thank
That's
you.
absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Angela, we have had a chance to sit back and reflect, haven't we, on what Valerie has said. What a fantastic conversation. What did you take out of it?
I was really energized by Valerie's conversation. I think, I'm a real advocate of having a vision And that's a very important part of the beyond resilience world, is that, the river is flowing towards her vision. But Valerie had a fantastic metaphor, which for her was the phoenix. So being able to be reborn over and over again and recreate, reinvent yourself, know yourself differently, being able to let go of the past, I think, completely, totally, renew yourselves. You have to be able to let go of what was behind you and reimagine something new, and recognize that we have this dynamism inside us, and that we have this capacity, and to be able to go looking for it and cultivate it is an art.
I hear that the softness in your voice about talking about how important it is to see that in yourselves, see that ability to reimagine yourself, but also I think the compassion to yourself, to, letting go. Valerie made it really clear. It's not that easy when you've had a long career in politics or whatever to then move to something else, and taking the time and recognizing that it takes time. She said it took two years to kind of rethink, where is she going to go next? But having that optimism to know that was possible, which is
and holding the optimism again. You and I are both optimists, Carol, and we often have this conversation about creating possibility and the importance of optimism. But I want to come back to what you've just said. So often we think we should know immediately after. I should immediately know what's next. I'm going to go from this to this, and it's a linear trajectory. Or if it's not linear, we have a sense of failure, that we haven't immediately come up with the next vision. And that was also what I particularly loved in Valerie's conversation. Take the time to find out, be with the unknown, without the pressure of having to have all the answers immediately, which is so much a resilience metaphor rather than a beyond resilience, transformative metaphor, the world beyond resilience, where it's normal that we do take the time for these things. And what else did you see?
Well, I was particularly struck with the way she talked, again, quite pragmatically, about now we've lost this view of collective power. We've lost our imagination around what could be possible in the future. And she really felt, she feels really strongly that we can reignite that and we can build on that, but we have to do it together. And that collective power is what moves us forward, piece by piece. And the joy of connecting as it comes across again and again, and it came out with her. And I loved the real experience of part of the joy of being in this socialist group was a hot guy. And, it's just like, this is life, right? This is our experience. It's not just about big ideas or hunkering down or whatever. It's those individual connections with people and the things that bring us magic.
I love that. Exactly. I think our listeners will notice a theme through our podcast as well, of not having to be about all by yourself, but again, all of the connection, and how you've just highlighted that the individual moments, they're very human. Our human moments are so important, and not diminishing them, like making them consciously part of that process is really fantastic. So yeah. So we
lot to learn from Valerie.
To learn from Valerie, and we encourage you to listen to this again and see what the nuggets you can pull out for yourself. I love that gold nugget, but I'm going to use it every time. And the practical parts of what you can find for yourselves in these conversations to create your own world beyond resilience.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the World Beyond Resilience podcast.
If anything you heard today sparked an aha moment or made you think differently about resilience, please tell us about it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
And please share it with everyone you know.
For more episodes exploring how we can thrive beyond just bouncing back, follow our show on your favorite platforms. We absolutely love this topic, and we can see the possibility for this to create really powerful, vibrant, prosperous change in organizations and systems. So if there's
conversation interests you and you start to feel that spark as well, and you think it would be useful for yourself or within your organization, feel free to get in contact.
And of course, we have additional resources and deeper dives into all the topics we discuss on our website, which is worldbeyondresilience.com.
So until next time, remember, there's a whole world of possibilities beyond just being resilient. Take care.